morning. Hope you're having a good morning and a good week and a good month. This month is over. Most of the kids are out of school by today or so in this area, and I know in some areas they go till June and then they don't go back until after Labor Day, I think that is. And can you adjust your schedule again, right? It's time to adjust. It's all, life has a lot of adjustments, right? Matter of fact, I think almost every day I got to make adjustments. Maybe someday I'll get it perfect. That's actually what I want to talk about today because none of us are perfect. Jesus is perfect. God is perfect, right? He made all things good. He made you. He made me. And he knew what he was doing. And he also knew that we were going to mess things up. I talk a lot about how he knew that Adam and Eve were going to mess up the garden before he even put them there. And yet he put them there anyway. He could have said, let's just not do this. You ever heard those kind of days? Let's just not do this today. I have a lot of those days anymore. I'm just tired, right? I'm not getting it together, but I know that I'm imperfect. I know that I don't have everything together. I was praying this morning as I was walking and just I was giving God everything, just one at a time. I was going, okay, God, see this little thing right here? Take that and give me wisdom. And then, just in case God hasn't got it figured out, I give him a whole bunch of suggestions. I've made a mess of this. Can you give me, Lord, give me wisdom? Because the scriptures say he gives wisdoms, right? And out of his word come knowledge and understanding, right? And Proverbs 2:6. So I give him each situation. Okay, I don't know how to deal with this. Please give me wisdom. And then I give him this, I messed up this, or I did this wrong, or I made a bad choice here. Give me wisdom to know how. And then, just in case he doesn't have enough clue of what to do, I give him some suggestions. Help me do this. Help me do this, help me do it this way, help me do it that way. Or, if you got a good idea, God, give me your idea then, right? So I give him a lot of ideas just in case he ran out of them, right? So, yeah, that's a lot of my prayers sometimes. But in the process, I'm giving him those anxieties, I'm giving him those worries, and I'm waiting on him to give answers, to give wisdom, to give direction, right? Or to just do a full scale miracle. That would be awesome, right? However he does it, though, he's going to answer. And so, as I was praying about some things, I was like, man, I'm in some situations and they're just because of choices I made. They're not anything that somebody did to me. I'm not a victim. Maybe, and sometimes it's just choices I've made, and maybe they weren't the best one, or maybe they were the best one, but it still had some, even in the best circumstances, there can be some negatives tossed in there, right? I mean, if God gave you a house, and if God gives you a house, I don't think you're going to have a payment, right? So if God gives you, you're still going to have property taxes, you're still going to have electricity. And if it's a bigger house, you're going to have more to clean. There's always something else, even with the good stuff, right? And so we just have to trust Him with everything. And so I was thinking about all of that, and then I was thinking, our Bible heroes weren't perfect, but it didn't keep God from using them. That's what gives me a little bit of hope that he can still use me, right? That he can still use you. I thought of David and Bathsheba. God anointed David as a young man to be king. Now, it was a long time and some giants in between before he actually became king and fulfilled what God had given him, right? The promises that he had made David. It was a long way around. And in the meantime, Saul was chasing him and David didn't do anything wrong. He found himself in a really difficult circumstance and situation, and yet he didn't even do anything wrong. He didn't even make bad choices, right? And yet he found himself in difficult circumstances. But David messed up. After he was king, maybe it went to his head. Maybe he knew he could have whatever he wanted because he was king, and he went after Bathsheba, who was someone else's wife. And even Nathan the prophet told him, he said, you could have had anything any person, any woman in the land would be glad to be your wife, but you can't go get somebody else's wife, right? And yet God didn't say, you know what, you're going to mess up so bad down in a few years. I'm just not even going to make you king. No, he didn't take back any of his promises to David, any of the prophecies that he made over it. Over David, he didn't change anything pertaining to David based on the sin that David was going to do later on. David was imperfect, and yet God said he's a man after my own heart. David was always after God's heart. yet he still made mistakes. Then I thought of Samson and Delilah. God made some promises to Samson early on. He made him, he promised him that he was going to wipe out a bunch of the Philistines and things like that. And yet Samson did exactly what he was told not to do. He went after women of another culture in another area and got him a Delilah. He thought she was Delilah the delight, and he went after her because he wanted her and he could have her, right? And he went and got her, and he lost his eyesight. She was a trap. She was a trick, right? In the worst sense of the worst sense of the word, right? It was a trap, and he lost his eyesight, but he didn't lose the call of God. He lost his eyesight, his physical eyesight, but he held on to God. And I'm sure, I can't even imagine what it would have been like sitting in that prison those last few years of his life with no eyes, no sight. Did he seek God in those dark hours? It was dark in his soul and dark in the world because he couldn't see anymore. Did he really seek God in those last years? Did he, we don't have anything. We don't know what he might have prayed, what he might have confessed. Maybe he repented, spent a lot of time repenting. It didn't take it back. What he did though, right? But God didn't say, you're going to mess up, so never mind. Or you messed up, never mind. He still used Samson. And he still fulfilled the exact thing he prophesied before Samson was born. I'm going to use him to wipe out a bunch of the bad people, right? And he still did it, even though Samson messed up. He didn't keep him out of fellowship with God. It didn't keep him from fulfilling what God had promised him. Then I thought about Gideon. Gideon did some really cool stuff. You can read about Gideon in Judges 6, about 6 through 8 or 9. And Gideon was, God used Gideon to defeat the Midianites, and he even took 300 men and beat what the King James uses the term innumerable. You couldn't even count how many how many people were against him. And God told Gideon, you got too many people. We need to shuck them down to uh, to 300, and then they're gonna know I did it, right? But Gideon, in the end, and they made Gideon a leader, and he became a judge, and then in the end, he made an idol, and he wandered away from God. But God didn't say, you're going to mess up, so I'm not going to use you. You're going to mess up down the road. You're going to get it all wrong later, so I don't want to use you. No, he didn't exclude Gideon from his promises. He didn't exclude Gideon from what he wanted him to do. He still called Gideon, knowing Gideon was going to mess up. He wasn't perfect. Gideon was imperfect, right? And I even thought about Moses. Moses killed a guy, right? Before he killed an Egyptian. That God had given him a passion. He had a passion for his people. And he knew where he came from, even though he was raised in Pharaoh's household in the palace, right? And so he's kind of in between. He didn't quite fit in with the Jews, and he didn't quite fit in with the Egyptians, and yet there he was in between. But he had that in his heart. He was Jewish. He knew he was a Hebrew, and he knew that, you know, he had that passion for his roots and for his ancestors and for his people, right? And so he killed the Egyptian and buried him. And then when he got found out, he ran to the wilderness. Well, it was the very wilderness that God called him in, even after he killed the guy. God didn't say, "Oh, if you hadn't killed that Egyptian, I could have used you." Right? If you hadn't done this, I could have done that. But now you messed it all. No. No, God did. God said, "Hey," God made a spectacular sight in the middle of the wilderness. This tree is burning, but it's not being consumed. I'd have gone to look. You would have too. But when my rod turned into a snake, baby, I'd have been out of there. The guy gone. Right? Ain't no picking it up by the tail. No, I'm done. Right? But God didn't say, Moses, you're gonna mess up later, and I'm gonna write my law on tablets of stone with my finger, and you're gonna get so mad at these same people you're protecting now, you're gonna break the tablet. You're gonna throw it down out of anger. He was angry with them. But God didn't tell Moses, you're not going to be perfect. And then later he actually disobeyed God, and he didn't even get to go in the promised land. But God didn't say, you're imperfect, Moses. I'm sorry. I can't use you to go get my people because you're going to mess things up. You're not even going to get to go into promised land yourself. No, God didn't say that. He knew Moses was imperfect. He knew Moses was human. There's a scripture in Psalms. I'd have to look it up real quick. It says, God knows we're just flesh. The old King James says, God knows we're just dust. He knows He formed us out of the dust and breathed His life into Adam, breathed, and it's still sustaining us. God knew we were going to be imperfect. He knows all my flaws, and you probably know some of them. And some of them I'll just confess them and tell them to you if you want to know. But God knows that, and He never says, "I can't use you because you're imperfect. I don't want to walk with you because you just don't have it all together. You make bad decisions. I don't want to hang out with you." No, God never says those sort of things. God is full of compassion, and He's passionately pursuing a relationship with us. And that's the New Living Translation, Exodus 34:14. He's passionate about a relationship with His people. He's not passionate about finding somebody who's perfect. He's not passionate about finding someone who makes the best decisions in the world in every realm you can even imagine, your career, your finances, your friends, your relationships. He's not. No, he just wants a relationship with you. He wants a relationship with us, and He's passionate about it. And He says, I can look past those flaws. And a matter of fact, I'll send my Son to take away the sin. I don't even have to worry about it anymore, right? So He's not worried about us being perfect. He's not worried about us getting it right every time. He just wants us to keep pursuing Him. Why? Because He's still pursuing us. And that's the way it's going to be forever. As long as there's time, He's looking for imperfect people. He knows there's no perfect people. Jesus already walked on this earth. It's done, right? He's like, okay, well, that's it, right? And He still loves us. He still gives us His peace. He still gives us His grace. He still gives us His mercy. Even when we make bad decisions and get ourselves in a bind, He goes, I'll help you out. Here's some wisdom. Let's work through it. let's turn this caterpillar situation into a butterfly. It's going to take a little bit of work, but it's going to be beautiful in the end, right? That's what He does with our broken lives, with our imperfect actions, with our imperfect humanness, right? You guys, God loves you. He's passionately pursuing you. For that reason, we can peace out, right? Peace out. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.